Hi everyone, welcome to THT, and today we are talking about Spark of Rebellion and answering the interesting question of was Spark of Rebellion a good set? And if so, how good was it? What were the positives and what were the negatives? So obviously, I hope everybody had a great pre-release weekend, and now that everybody is of course, getting into Shadows of the Galaxy, I thought it was a good time to reflect one last time on Spark of Rebellion and think about what was the good, what was the positives, where were the negatives for the set, and maybe give my opinion from not only from a player standpoint but also from a game design standpoint as a game designer, uh, how I feel about this meta, what could be improved for future meta. Obviously, none of our feedback will have any impact on the next 5 or even 6 sets, because I think the designers are already working on set number 9 probably, or even number 10. So, but it is still interesting to kind of reflect on after the fact, now that the memory of Spark Rebellion is still fresh in our mind. What is the perception of how good this set was? And my objective is to do a send-off videos at the end of every set, and then kind of compare them to each other. So then we can so then let's say if I decide to make a tier list of the sets a few years later, I will have something to go back to in terms of like how I felt about this expansion right after it ended, essentially. So I thought that was a very interesting video to make. But first, talk about the positives of Spark of Rebellion. What things were very well done in this expansion? The first positive, in my opinion, is that they really nailed the accessibility of the set. So they made a set that was very accessible, lots of abilities, lots of cards that were very simple in their design, very clear on what they were trying to do, and yet it was not simplistic, and yet we'll still have relatively complex card with activated abilities, triggered abilities, that kind of thing. So I felt that they really managed to find the right balance between accessibility and simplicity, but and yet not being like just kindergarten simple. So it's something, for example, that I really reproach, that I really criticize on Lorcana, for example. That Lorcana was, in my opinion, as a first set, way too simplistic, too many vanilla card, two things that don't do really anything interesting. Once again, it's okay to have a couple of cards like this, but having like almost 4 times the same card was just with different colors and just being two for ones and every colored, that kind of design really turned me off. In Spark of Rebellion, I think like FFG really managed to find the right middle ground. So here I put a few examples. Sabine, once again, you see the leader. There's never any doubt on how Sabine is supposed to be played. Is obviously an aggressive leader, and yet her ability, knowing when to ping, when not to ping, require a bit of finesse to nail it properly. Vader, of course, kind of this mid-range rampy leader, very satisfying to play as it comes into and Aiden as this pure control leader. So those are like archetypes that are easy to understand, and yet provide a lot of depth to your game and enable a lot of different playstyle. So I thought this was extremely well done. The second positive is obviously the fact that the elephant in the room is the fact that the set was relatively well balanced and produced probably one of the best set 1 meta I ever seen in any card game. So this is a screenshot from my tier list breakdown, so maybe it's a little bit outdated, maybe there's a couple of things that you don't agree with on it, but the idea is that set 1 provided a wide diversity of different decks that you could play. Almost every leader was playable and playable in multiple different colors. And you could win tournaments playing any of those leaders, and I think that was really well done. The balance was not only of leaders but also of cards and playstyle was extremely good. I don't know, once again, I don't know if this was all intended. by the designer. I don't know if the designers predicted the meta to be that good, but forth to admit that it was extremely good, and we just simply had so many different archetypes that we could play, and definitely I think that when people will think about Spark of Rebellion meta, everybody will remember it to be very good and very diverse and very fun. And this is probably what's gonna stick the most into people's memory as time goes by. Just an excellent meta. So as I said, not only was it a very diverse meta, but there were also a wide array of different archetypes. So once again, this is from my video of the metagame breakdown. You could be playing pure aggro decks, tempo mid-range, ramp control, hard control. And yeah, so and yet, so despite this wide diversity of playstyle, we didn't have any combo decks, which is still like one of the big archetypes that is missing from this game. But to be honest, I don't think you want to have a combo deck right away from set one. Those combo archetypes usually appear later on down the line. I'm personally a big fan of combo decks as long as they are interactive. And we'll see if combo decks appear later on, but if they will appear, it's probably going to take a little bit of time. But nevertheless, this diversity of decks was of different playstyle was very good for set one once again. So kudos to the designers once again on that, because it was really an important part of what makes the game fun at a competitive level, but even at the casual level as well to some extent. Next, what I really like and also what contributed to the diversity in the meta is that the designer gave us the tools to be able to adapt and balance the meta. So one of the great thing about Star Wars Unlimited is that you can afford to play cards that are a bit more situational, because any card can be resourced at any time, and also we also had access to sideboards in most of the tournaments that were organized. And this gives the player the tools to, but all of this is kind of pointless if the designers are not designing any cards that are meant to be played for specific situations to deal with specific decks. And the designer really thought ahead on this and gave us a lot of different tools. So for example, the Emperor's Legion, which seemed to be like a pretty bad card at first, ended up being a relatively important anti counters to Super Laser Blast. Spark of Rebellion was a decent card, but really started to see a lot of play when hard control started to become a thing. Against upgrade, we got anti-upgrade card like Disabling Fang Fighters, Traitorous, which was an excellent card against deck who have very powerful 3-drops, or deck would like to put upgrades on smaller units, so very good for example against Boba. Constant Star Vipers was an excellent. I don't think green decks would have been able to have any good matchup against aggro if they didn't have access to Star Vipers. And even a card which didn't seem so powerful like Cargo Juggernaut was really a great tool for mid-range blue decks to be able to get themselves out of danger from aggro as well. So it's just they really, and obviously there's tons of other examples. I could have named Relentless for example, but yeah, the idea is that the designers really gave us the tool uh, to um, to basically be able to balance the game by ourselves, and I think this is very important. Um, Another great things about Spark of Rebellion is like it did a great job at establishing the aspect identities and a healthy framework to evolve from. So after Spark of Rebellion, there is no doubt into we know exactly what the 4 different aspects do. We know what are the core cards that kind of like work with those archetypes, and I think the designers did a really good job at giving those 4 different colors a clear identity. I feel like the villainy heroism identity is a little bit more kind of thematic rather than a mechanic. But the 4 main colors have a clear playstyle and identity, which makes it a very fun thing to work around. The same way as Magic the Gathering did an amazing job at kind of creating, even though not everything was fully established, but did a really great job at establishing a framework for the 5 different colors. Here, they did a great job with this as well in Spark of Rebellion. So yeah, this were basically the main positive. As you can know, there's some positive that we kind of expect from first set, like establishing the groundwork for what the different aspects are going to be. But things that I was not expecting, and that is definitely a lot more difficult to nail correctly, was definitely the fact that the metagame was a very, very good surprise. On a more neutral aspect, I didn't know if I wanted to put this as a positive or a negative, but I decided to talk about the legendaries in the set. Legendaries in the set were super, super cool. They really felt like legendaries. They felt like super powerful, super impactful, and they were really cards that you were really excited to open. And I think they did a really great job at this. So by the way, in this review of Spark of Rebellion, I'm not talking about things that are related to the game itself, like for example the mechanics of the game, the booster structures, the organized play, or even the distribution issues. I'm really talking about stuff that are related to the set design specifically. So as I said, in terms of set design, they did a really great job with the legendaries, really making legendaries to be very powerful and really feeling like they were legendaries, and opening legendaries in the set really felt amazing. But the other side of the coin and the disadvantage of that was that as a result, legendaries were on very high demand and were very expensive. It's kind of like the way you want to look at this. If you're opening boosters, it definitely feels good to have legendaries and to open great legendaries. On the other hand, if you do not find them, if you don't manage to open them, and you have to buy them as singles or trade for them, it really becomes like very expensive. So there's no real answer to that question. Um, um, I think there's some pro and cons for both, but it's something that I wanted to note. So let's talk about the negative, because there are quite a few negatives or things that could have been done slightly better in the set, at least in my opinion. Um, and the first one is the art. So art in Spark of Rebellion was quite inconsistent, both in terms of style and quality. So in terms of style, I think it's all clear that they've decided to go for a comic book kind of style. The problem is comic book style artwork is kind of a vague term that encapsulates a lot of different styles, and I think it would have been better for the game if they would have settled on the specific style of comic book rather than just going kind of all over the place. But some of the cards were not even comic book style in my opinion. They were straight up cartoon. Good example for this is the Han Solo leader and the Chewbacca leader were straight up out of a cartoon. They are basically art that could have been designed for Lorcana, not for Star Wars Unlimited. So obviously there's always some people, it is subjective at the end of the day, and there's some people who are going to love those art. But I feel like overall the art was very divisive, and if I ask people around me, why are you not playing Star Wars Unlimited? Why are you not, you're a fan of Star Wars, you like card games, why are you not playing Star Wars Unlimited? The three common answer I get is number one, that they are playing a different card game and they can't be playing multiple card games at once. They just the market is very competitive. The second reason they give me is that they don't have faith in FFG because of how many times FFG has kind of like screwed up in the past, which is understandable. And then the third reason that they give me is that they don't like the art. That's like the number three reason why people don't play this game. And the art is very divisive. My opinion is that in the card in the set itself, you should have a card art that is relatively cohesive and where everything kind of fits together. And then with promos, with OP packs, and promos, you can afford to be a little bit more wild. You can afford to create arts which is a little bit more different and a little bit more like out of the box. So then if you really like arts that is really kind of special and different, you can still have access to this through OP, but at least the majority of people do not have to play with inconsistent art in the thing. So I think this is kind of a win-win for everybody if you do it that way. But instead they've decided to force this inconsistency down the throat of people who don't like it by putting it in the main set with no possible alternative. So for Han Solo and Chewbacca, there is an alternative. You can play the showcase version of them, which are very nice, but the problem is like they're very expensive. But for most of those cards, there's really simply no alternative. So it's a little bit unfortunate. I think the game would have benefited from a more consistency in terms of style and sometimes even in terms of quality. But it is what it is. I don't think it's a big deal, but for some people it is a big deal, and you don't hear it so much at the committee. I mean, there's a lot of people who criticize the art. Those criticisms have died off a little bit, and I think the reason why they died off is simply because people who do not like the art simply don't play the game, therefore don't take part in the community discussions. But I feel like the game would have been more successful if it had a art that was a bit more consistent. For me, it is a pretty big negative, even though it didn't affect me too much because for me art is important, but it's not the end of the world if a few cards just don't have a great art, as long as the game itself is good. But I'm sure it was a turn off for many people, so this is why I mentioned it in priority in the negatives. I've heard that FFG is going to be stabilizing the art a little bit more within set 3, and I think that's great. And make it a little bit more consistent by set 3, so that's nice. We'll see if it ends up happening. In Already in Shadows of the Galaxy, I can tell that there are a lot fewer arts, which is a little bit out of the pack. There's still some which are very weird, but overall, I feel like there's been an increase in quality between set 1 and set 2. Moving on, we got, of course, the elephant in the room. Yes, Boba was overtuned and still is overtuned, but it was specifically obvious in set 1, and it might even be more obvious in set 2, but we'll see how it goes. So, yeah, Boba clearly was overtuned. I think the designers said in the past that basically the reason why Boba Fett has better stats than the other leaders is because his ability is considered to be more situational and a bit weaker. It turned out that I don't think that was the case at all. I think that the ability ended up being just as good as other leaders' ability. And so therefore just Boba had just strictly better stats than other leader for no real reason. And not only that, Yellow Black was a very strong package in the game, and this combination with Fast Fire Spray was kind of the nail in the coffin to make Boba Fett the undeniably best leader in the game. With all that being said, of course, Boba Fett was definitely overtuned, but people kind of find counters to it. It comes back to what I was saying earlier about the set providing you with answers and providing you with options to balance the meta. And I think if those options did not exist, Boba would have been unstoppable. But people kind of adapted their decks in order to beat Boba. It kind of balanced things out. I think one thing notably that saved the meta, in my opinion, is the presence of hard control that really kind of like put Boba in check for the most part. So in my opinion, Boba was clearly a mistake. I feel like Boba should have had smaller stats, or Fed Fire Spray should have been not as good. Like there's kind of like a lot of things that could have been done to kind of balance things. Clearly, it was a mistake to make Boba that strong, but as I said, there's always kind of this dynamic, a little bit kind of free for all when you're playing a free for all board game, and someone starts to become a little bit too strong, then people kind of gang up against them. This is kind of what happened with the meta, where yeah, Boba was definitely the best deck, but people kind of adapted their deck to beat it, which kind of reestablished the balance. So we avoided the disaster, but I feel like if the designer could go backward, I'm pretty sure they would change a few things about Boba, and this would create this kind of healthier meta where people are not forced to be kind of countering Boba to be able to exist. And I think that would have been a good thing. But anyway, yeah, Boba was overtuned. This could have been avoided, and it would have made the game better. But at the end of the day, it was not. It was not the end of the world. People were able to adapt because the rest of the set was very smartly designed. It's kind of how I feel about this. My second criticism related to balance was that there has been a lot of wasted opportunities with notably with double aspect deck. So the only double aspect deck which was truly competitive was basically was Boba yellow, obviously, and then Iden blue. So basically, Iden blue is kind of a weird one because yes, and in one hand, because the Iden blue benefited from another double aspect card that doesn't say its name, which is forgot his name, which was yeah, Charleston. So Charleston was kind of an extra double blue aspect, but because Heroism does not have access to Charleston, then as a result, double aspect, double blue white was basically unplayable. So, but I think if it's even more obvious, double red was definitely missing something in order to be good, and double green was straight up just very hard to play. If like basically did not really have any significant success in at a competitive level. And I think the big reason why this is the case is simply been when you look at the double aspect card, they're not. There's some strong imbalances. Double yellow as by far the best double aspect cards in the game, and then double green got two pretty much unplayable double spec card. Red with Running Cry got also a pretty bad. And whenever you have so few double aspect card in the deck, only three per color, any one of them that is not playable has a huge toll, a huge impact on how playable the entire archetype is. So I feel like once again, it's not a big criticism because at the end of the day, it's normal that it's kind of natural that double aspect deck are not super strong in set one because as more sets are being released and there's more cards in the card pool, it becomes easier to focus on one specific color. So it was not, it's not like a big criticism, but I just feel like this is something that could have been improved. I feel like double green could have been made viable if just one or even two more double aspect cards were better. And same goes for red, and same goes for blue, especially if you're talking about the blue-white double aspect deck. So once again, not a really big deal, but it is something that I've noticed. Another one, and this one is a bit more negative, is on, of course, the certain leaders that simply did not have the support they deserve to be able to work. So I understand that there are some leaders that are maybe not so good right now, and are going to become better as time goes by. But I believe that I think a good example of this is Grand Inquisitor, but Grand Inquisitor was still kind of playable and kind of competitive, even out of set one. And yes, okay, it's gonna get better as time goes by, as it gets more tool. But I feel like Grand Inquisitor was definitely playable out of set one. And I think it was very well designed. That's not the case of some of the other leaders. Era Syndulla, for example, is a good example for this. It's simply she didn't simply have a lot of support in the set, nothing that really benefited you from there's no real payoff for playing a full Spectre deck in the set. Um, Grand Admiral Thrawn also kind of didn't have, and I think one of the major issue for Grand Admiral Thrawn was that Chimera was not good. I think if Chimera was much stronger and really worked well with Grand Admiral Thrawn, I think Admiral Thrawn was really that close from seeing competitive like a significantly more competitive play. And then of course the poor RG88 definitely needed some more aggro options. I think if IGAGA was stronger, it could have made a villainy aggro playable, and this would have created more aggro archetype. Because right now the only aggro deck that really was a thing in the set was heroism aggro with either Leia or Sabine, which I think once again is kind of a wasted opportunities. Yes, of course, none of those cards were needed to make a diverse meta. We definitely did have a diverse meta, but I'm always thinking what could have been. It could have been even better. Imagine a meta where Era Syndulla would have been meta, where Spectre would have been meta, and Aggro Villainy would have been meta, and Thrawn as... That would have been cool. That would have been awesome. So there's the argument of saying that not every leader needs to be playable, that certain leaders are just meant for casual play. And I personally disagree with that vision. I believe that a leader being competitive does not prevent it from being casual friendly. So let's say theoretically, if Era Syndulla was like a little bit better or just had more payoff Spectre cards in the set, casual players will still love to play her. Like, actually, the fact that she's even stronger would only be upsides. Like, it's not because you're a casual player that you want to lose on purpose. You want to, yes, you want to create fun and thematic deck, and you don't want to go on the internet to grab lists. You just want to build your own decks. But you also want those decks to perform. You want to win with those decks. So yes, winning is not your priority, but it is definitely a factor that contributes to the fun of the game. So if you build Era Syndula and you realize that you're getting absolutely smashed by people, because I mean, you can create a decent Era Syndula deck and win games, but definitely by playing Era Syndula, you're shooting yourself in the foot and combine. So I feel like knowing that your archetype can potentially be competitive would only be for you an incentive to jump into competitive play instead of just staying simply with like a strictly casual decks and have to change the if you want to play competitive. And imagine if you say to someone is bring an Era Syndula deck to the table and it's like, okay, this is my fun deck, my pet deck, I love these leaders, I love the specters, I love the rebels, the show, and I really want to play a deck around her and stuff, and he brings a deck and then the deck is like, okay, now I like this deck and I would like to bring it to a tournament, and he gets absolutely smashed. uh, and as he gets smashed, here goes. You got. It would be amazing if I could have said to this guy, "Oh yeah, all you have to do is adapt your deck, bring this card, swap this card, and you're gonna be able to be competitive." But no, I couldn't say that. I could say that, okay, well, you can maybe you can make your deck a little bit better. Unfortunately, even as at our best, you will struggle with Era, and you will be at a disadvantage by playing her in tournament. And I think this is not ideal. I would rather tell that person that it is possible to make Era Syndura work at a competitive level. So even for casual players, it does matter to have leaders that are actually at least potentially playable competitively. So in my opinion, yeah. So I think those are wasted opportunities. Uh, it would have been very easy to make those leaders playable, and I think FFG could have made them better. Is that a big deal? Not really, but it is something that I wanted to notice. Moving on, I wanted to talk about how much I hate For a Cause I Believe in, and how much from a design standpoint, I think this card is probably one of the least fun trading card I've seen in a long time in a card game. Like, this card is really the opposite of fun. And there's multiple things I really dislike about this card from a design standpoint. So the first question is, does aggro needs direct damage, out of hand damage, in order to be good? And the answer to that question is yes, absolutely, it does need damage, out of hand damage. You do need hand of hand damage aggro to be good. I'm not denying that fact. But I think there's certain things you shouldn't be doing. The first thing for me is a red flag for direct damage card is something that deals a lot of damage with a single card. For example, Daring Raid is fine because it's like 2 damage for one card, which mean that unless you're really really close to dead, you shouldn't be worrying too much about it, or your opponent is going to need to have multiple one of them. For cards, I believe, deal a lot of damage with a single card. So that's the first thing I really don't like. Um, Another thing I don't like is the fact that it's completely uninteractive. There's literally nothing as a player that you can do in order to be able to beat that card. And this has a very bad impact on the meta because it makes it so in order to deal with certain aggro decks, you have no other choice but to have healing. Basically, without healing, if you're playing a slower deck that doesn't have, basically slow decks that don't have heal are effectively almost impossible to play. And as a result, there are certain decks which I think could have been very powerful, like for example Palpatine Green, or could have been very good decks, but simply because they don't have consistent healing, they straight up lose to aggro. And I think this didn't have a good impact on the meta. Another thing that really had a bad impact on the meta is because this card requires you to have heroism cards in your deck, and really the card becomes a lot worse as you get more non-heroism card in your deck. This makes it so there's tons of great aggro card that simply were not playable because they didn't combine well with For a Cause I Believe in. And this was another negative. This was another significantly negative impact on the meta as a result. And finally, the final bullshit about this card, and the final thing, the nail in the coffin that really makes me hate this card, is the ability that you can play this, and this allows you to find more copies of 4 cards I believe in. Because personally, I'm okay with games where my opponent just plays 1 4 cards I believe in. The problem arises when he start to play 2 or even 3 4 cards I believe in a single game, and just simply just steal the game like this. The most unfun and the most infuriating games I've ever played in Star Wars Unlimited were games where I was playing against aggro that basically managed to chain multiple 4 cards I believe in. So this card is not fun, and it's not a good design. It's not a well designed card, and it unfortunately was a card that was very present in the meta. So as I said, yes, aggro decks do need some sort of direct damage, but try to make direct damage that either doesn't deal like a million damage for one single card, or so they are easy to play around, or make cards that are a little bit more interactive. So a good example for this, for example, is Chaos of War. I think like Chaos of War as a direct damage card is better designed, because as a player you can kind of like play around it just simply by kind of emptying your hand as quickly as possible. You can try to play around it a little bit. 4 cards I believe in, you can't interact with it at all. There's literally nothing you can do to reduce its effectiveness outside of just once again trying to play healing cards. But not every aspect has access to healing, unfortunately. And the fact that it restricts the design space of your deck simply by existing is a problem in my opinion. Anyway, this was my last rant, my last negative. So overall, what do I think about 4 cards I believe in? Overall, as you can see, my negatives were very nitpicky, very common from some details, some little things that could have been better in my opinion. While the positives were very broad and very important. Like it was very broad of like the meta is great, and the meta being great, I cannot emphasize enough how important that is for any competitive player out there. It is the most important factor. People, when they jump into a card game, what is the first question they ask? Is like, how good is the meta? How diverse is the meta? How balanced the game is? And on this Spark of Rebellion, on top of doing all the stuff that we expect from set 1 to be doing when it's designed by competent people, on top of all that, it also had a great balance. And please, guys, do not take this for granted, because it is not easy at all to balance a card game, especially with only one set. And this was very, very well done. Whether it was completely intentional or there's been a mix of intentionality and being a little bit lucky on on things turned out, I don't know, and honestly I don't care. The meta was extremely well balanced, and this contributed immensely into how enjoyable this set was. And overall, I think this set was great, and I think it will be remembered as one of the greatest sets ever made for Spark of Rebellion. And I'm gonna rate this a 8.5 out of 10. So this could be a little bit kind of a rough rating. I obviously do not want to give it a 10 out of 10, because 10 out of 10 means that there would just simply be no negatives or very few negatives. I think the art is a significant, it might not be significant for a lot of you, but I think if you judge and you talk about the game from an objective standpoint, it's something that really hurt the popularity of the game in my opinion. And I cannot give it the perfect score. I cannot give the set the perfect score just for that base alone. And then of course a couple of small like kind of mistake here and there that could have been easily avoided also made me that I didn't want it to go into 9, and I settled on 8.5. Still an amazing rating for the set, and I don't expect the upcoming set to be as good. We'll see. Once again, always nice to keep your expectation realistic and be happily surprised. But yeah, this set was really good. I'll give it an 8.5 out of 10. Anyway, let me know your opinion about the set, whether you loved it or whether you disliked, or whatever there's, how much you would have give, what is the rating you would have give it. And I think this is a proper send-off for Spark of Rebellion. This was a great time, and of course now time moves on, and I'm super excited to get my toe into playing Shadows of the Galaxy in person with Yeah. Um, and I hope you guys had an amazing pre-release. I only got one pre-release personally in my area, but I'm gonna have other ones throughout the week. So that's gonna be a lot of fun. If you are curious, I actually won my pre-release here. I played. It was a 4-round tournament, and I won all 4 rounds. And I was playing a Cad Bane deck. I was playing a Cad Bane green deck. I felt like the Cad Bane Underworld was very strong and sealed. So that's for the curious people. And once again, if you like this kind of video, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.